Water dripped from a broken pipe in the ceiling, making a steady rhythm that echoed through the empty hallway. Roy Fletcher pushed his cleaning cart along the white floor tiles, humming quietly to himself. The research facility felt different at night when all the scientists went home. During the day, beings from 20 different worlds walked these halls, speaking languages that sounded like music or thunder. Now it was just Roy and the soft buzz of air recyclers. He had been cleaning this place for 3 years. Every night, same routine. Start in the main labs, work through the offices, finish in the storage areas. Roy liked the quiet. After 15 years in the military, he had heard enough shouting and explosions to last several lifetimes. This job let him think. Let him remember his old squad without anyone asking questions about the scars on his hands. The xenobiology wing smelled like chemicals, and something sweet that came from the alien plant samples. Roy wiped down the computer screens and emptied trash bins filled with used research papers. Most of the writing was in scripts he could not read, but sometimes he saw pictures of creatures that looked like they came from dreams. Big ones, small ones, some with too many eyes, others with no eyes at all. A soft sound made him stop pushing the cart. Roy tilted his head, listening. There it was again, coming from the supply closet at the end of the hall. It sounded like crying, but not quite human crying. More like a hurt animal trying to stay quiet. Roy pulled his keycard from his belt and walked toward the closet. The sound stopped when his footsteps got closer. He pressed his ear to the door and heard nothing but his own breathing. Maybe he was getting old, hearing things that were not there. But when he stepped back, the crying started again, so soft he almost missed it. The door opened with a small beep. Roy reached for the light switch and froze. In the corner, behind a stack of cleaning supplies, something moved. 2 large eyes caught the light and glowed like amber gems. The creature was small, maybe the size of a house cat, with scales that seemed to shift color in the artificial light. Wings, tiny and delicate, were folded against its back. Roy had seen many strange beings during his time at the facility, but nothing like this. The creature looked like the dragons from old Earth stories, but real and breathing and terrified. It pressed itself deeper into the corner when Roy took a step forward. "Easy there," Roy said in the same voice he used to calm nervous animals. "I will not hurt you." The creature's mouth opened, showing small, sharp teeth. When it spoke, the words came out in broken galactic standard, the common language used by most species in this part of the galaxy. "Please no hurt," it said. "Am small. Am lost." Roy felt his heart do something funny in his chest. The creature was a child, he realized. A scared child asking for help in a language that was not its own. Roy sat down on the floor, making himself smaller and less threatening. "What is your name?" he asked. The creature looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide if Roy could be trusted. "Starwing," it finally said. "My name translates to Starwing. Hello, Starwing. I am Roy." He pointed to himself. "What happened to you? Why are you hiding here?" Starwing's eyes filled with something that looked like tears, though they were silver instead of clear. "Bad people take me from sleeping place, do hurt things, make me bleed for tests. I run away when big noise happen in their ship. Hide here because may I stay here tonight? They hunt me." The words hit Roy like a punch to the stomach. Someone had been experimenting on a child. A baby, really, from the looks of it. The protective instinct that had made him a good soldier kicked in hard and fast. "Of course you can stay," Roy said without thinking. "Let me look at your injuries." Starwing hesitated, then crawled forward slowly. Roy could see cuts on the small creature's legs and back, some already healing, others still fresh. Whoever had done this had not been gentle. Roy felt anger building in his chest, the kind that used to get him in trouble during his military days. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Roy said. "Can you walk?" Starwing nodded and stood on shaky legs. The little dragon was even smaller than Roy had thought, probably weighing less than 5 pounds. Roy thought about the empty apartment waiting for him at the end of his shift. Not much of a home, but it had a bed and food and no one asking questions. "I live alone," Roy said. "It is not fancy, but it is safe. Do you want to come with me?" Starwing looked up at him with those huge amber eyes. "You help me? But you not know me."
"Why you help?"
Roy thought about that for a moment. Why was he helping? He could lose his job for this. Harboring an unauthorized life form was against facility rules and probably against colonial law too. But looking at this scared child, Roy knew he had no choice. "Because you asked," he said simply. "Because you are hurt and alone. and no child should be either of those things. Starwing made a sound that might have been a sob. The little dragon walked over to Roy and gently touched his hand with one small clawed finger. "You have good heart," Starwing said. "I feel it. Is warm and safe." Roy carefully picked up the little creature, surprised by how light it was. Starwing settled against his chest like a tired puppy, wings folding neatly along its back. "Let me finish my rounds," Roy said. "Then we will go home and figure out what to do next." As he carried Starwing through the empty halls, Roy wondered what he had gotten himself into. The facility was connected to research networks across dozens of worlds. If someone was looking for this little dragon, they would eventually trace the search here. Roy was just a janitor with an apartment and a small savings account. How could he protect anyone from the kind of people who would experiment on children? But Starwing was warm and trusting against his chest, and Roy remembered something his old squad leader used to say. "You do not have to be strong enough to win the whole war. You just have to be strong enough to win the next fight." Roy pushed his cart with one hand and held Starwing with the other, walking toward whatever came next. Roy's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that housed mostly facility workers. Small rooms, thin walls, and neighbors who minded their own business. Perfect for someone who wanted to stay invisible. He unlocked his door quietly, checking the hallway before stepping inside with Starwing still cradled in his arms. The little dragon looked around the modest space with wide eyes. One main room served as kitchen, living area, and dining room. A small bedroom barely fit a single bed. The bathroom was so tiny Roy had to duck to use the shower. But it was clean and warm and private. "This is home," Roy said, setting Starwing down gently on the old couch. "Not much to look at, but the door locks and no one bothers me here." Starwing climbed up onto the back of the couch, balancing easily despite the injured leg. The little dragon's head turned as it studied everything, like a bird learning a new territory. "Is safe here?" Starwing asked. "Safe as I can make it," Roy said. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" Starwing nodded. Roy went to his small kitchen and looked through the food he had. Humans ate different things than most aliens, and he had no idea what dragons needed. He settled on water and some plain crackers, things that should not hurt anyone. Starwing sniffed the crackers carefully before taking a small bite. The little dragon made a happy sound and ate the rest quickly. "More?" Roy asked. "Please." Starwing's tail, which Roy was just noticing, moved back and forth like a cat's when it was content. As Roy prepared more food, Starwing began to talk. The words came slowly at first, then faster as the little dragon grew more comfortable. "My people called Draconis Stellaris," Starwing said. "We were guardians once, long time ago. Kept safe the old knowledge, the important memories. But bad people came with weapons and ships. Hunted us because they afraid of what we remember." Roy sat down across from Starwing, listening carefully. "What kind of memories?" Starwing's eyes got distant. "Where the old cities are hidden. Which stars have good worlds for growing things. How to make the machines work that the ancient ones left behind. My people, we pass memories from parent to child like giving gifts. I have memories from grandparents I never meet. From great-great-grandparents who lived when stars were young. That sounds like a heavy burden for someone so small," Roy said. "Is not burden," Starwing said quickly. "Is honor. Is purpose. But now my people all gone, I think. Bad people with ships and laboratories, they take us away one by one. Do terrible things to learn our secrets." Roy felt that anger again, hot and steady in his chest. "The people who hurt you, do you know who they were?" Starwing nodded sadly. "Hegemony Consortium. Big company that makes weapons and ships and takes things from worlds that cannot fight back. They steal from my people for a long time, but we hide good, until they find the sleeping place, where we keep the egg safe when times are dangerous. Deep under ice on Dead Moon, place where scanners cannot see, but someone tell them where to look. They take eggs, take everything." Starwing made that sobbing sound again. "I only one who escape when their ship have accident." Roy reached out slowly and gently patted Starwing's head. The scales were warm and smooth, like polished stone. "I am sorry that happened to you. But you are safe now." "For how long?" Starwing asked. "They have many ships, many people who hunt. I just small dragon with hurt wing. Cannot fight, cannot run far." Roy looked at the little creature and made a decision that would change everything. "Then we will make you harder to find." Over the next few hours, Roy used skills he had learned in the military and things he had picked up working at the facility. He moved furniture around, creating a hidden space behind his bedroom wall where Starwing could hide if anyone came looking. He rigged up a small heating unit and air circulation system, making the space comfortable enough for a dragon who was used to warmer climates. Starwing watched him work with growing amazement. "You do this for me? But why? You're not my family, not my people." Roy paused in his work, holding a power drill in one hand. "Where I come from, we have a saying. Family is not just about blood. Sometimes family is about choice." Starwing's tail curled around itself, a sign Roy was learning meant deep emotion. "You choose me as family?" "If you want," Roy said. "I lost my squad a few years ago. Been alone since then. Maybe we both need someone to look after." Starwing scrambled across the room and wrapped tiny arms around Roy's leg. "Yes, I choose you too." "You are good heart, father." Roy felt something tight in his chest loosen for the first time in years. He finished building the hiding place and showed Starwing how to use it. The little dragon could slip inside through a panel that looked like part of the wall and be completely invisible from outside. "Tomorrow I go back to work," Roy said. "While I am gone, you stay hidden and quiet. I will bring food and anything else you need." "Can learn things while you're gone?" Starwing asked. "Have computer access?" Roy had been planning to disconnect his computer terminal to avoid any chance of Starwing being detected. But the hope in the little dragon's voice made him reconsider. "What do you want to learn?" "Everything," Starwing said simply. "About this world, about humans, about the star maps. My people, we love knowledge, is what we do." Roy spent another hour setting up a secure connection that would be harder to trace. He showed Starwing how to use the interface and warned about staying away from anything that might trigger security alerts. "I will be careful," Starwing promised. "Just want to understand better." Roy looked at the little dragon curled up on his couch, tail wrapped around like a cat, eyes bright with curiosity instead of fear. 3 hours ago, he had been a lonely janitor going through the motions of a quiet life. Now he was hiding a refugee from corporate hunters and planning ways to keep them both alive. "Get some rest," Roy said. "Tomorrow we start figuring out how to keep you safe for longer than one night." Starwing yawned, showing those small, sharp teeth. "Thank you, Roy, for everything." As Roy got ready for bed, he heard Starwing humming softly to itself on the couch. The sound was like wind chimes mixed with a lullaby, beautiful and alien but somehow comforting. Roy realized he was humming along without thinking about it. Maybe this was crazy. Maybe he was going to lose his job and end up in prison for harboring an unauthorized life form. But Starwing trusted him, and that trust felt like the most important thing Roy had been given in a very long time. He fell asleep to the sound of dragon songs, and woke up knowing that his quiet life was over forever. Roy knew something was wrong the moment he walked into the facility for his shift. Security guards in black uniforms stood at every entrance, scanning everyone who passed through. These were not the regular facility guards Roy knew by name. These were military contractors with hard eyes and weapons that looked too advanced for simple security work. "Random inspection," one of the guards said when Roy showed his identification card. "New safety protocols from corporate headquarters." Roy nodded and tried to look bored while his heart hammered against his ribs. He pushed his cleaning cart toward the maintenance area, taking the same route he had used for 3 years. But everything felt different now. Cameras that he had never paid attention to seemed to follow his movements. Doors that usually stayed open were locked tight. In the supply room where he kept his equipment, Roy found Dr. Beth Morrison waiting for him. She was one of the few scientists who had ever bothered to learn his name, always polite when their paths crossed during shift changes. Now she looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. "Roy," she said quietly, "we need to talk." "About what?" Roy asked, though he already knew. "About the security sweep that started this morning. About the consortium contractors asking questions about missing biological specimens. About the fact that someone saw unusual heat signatures in the xenobiology wing 3 nights ago." Roy felt cold despite the warm air in the room. "I do not know what you mean." Dr. Morrison stepped closer, lowering her voice even more. "I have been studying alien biology for 12 years, Roy. I know what consortium contractors look like when they are hunting something valuable. And I know you well enough to see when you are protecting something." Roy stared at her, trying to decide if this was a trap. Dr. Morrison had always seemed like one of the good ones, but the facility was full of people who answered to corporate boards and government committees. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because 3 months ago I was approached by consortium representatives. They wanted me to help identify genetic material from supposedly extinct species. When I refused, they made it very clear that cooperation was not optional. Dr. Morrison showed Roy a small scar on her wrist. They put a tracker in my arm and told me that failure to report unusual biological specimens would result in termination of employment and possible criminal charges. Roy felt sick. "So you are here to turn me in?" "I am here to warn you," Dr. Morrison said, "because I disabled my tracker 2 weeks ago, and I have been documenting everything the consortium has been doing. They are not just collecting specimens, Roy. They are systematically exterminating entire species to cover up illegal genetic harvesting operations." Roy leaned against his cleaning cart, trying to process what he was hearing. "How do you know all this?" "Because I found their real research files. Hidden databases, encrypted communications, shipping manifests for live specimens." Dr. Morrison pulled out a small data pad. "They have been operating for decades, Roy. Taking species that are supposed to be protected, experimenting on them, then making sure no one survives to tell the story." Roy thought about Starwing's words from the night before, about the sleeping place being discovered, about eggs being stolen, about being the only survivor from a ship accident. Maybe it had not been an accident at all. "What do you want from me?" Roy asked. "I want to help," Dr. Morrison said. "Whatever you are hiding, whatever you are protecting, they will find it eventually. These contractors are not going to give up and go home. They will search every room, every apartment, every hiding place until they find what they are looking for." Roy studied her face, looking for signs of deception. All he saw was determination and something that looked like guilt. "Why should I trust you?" he asked. "Because I have been where you are," Dr. Morrison said. 2 years ago, I found a wounded creature in my laboratory, something that should not have existed according to official records. I kept it secret, tried to heal it, tried to find somewhere safe to release it." Her voice got quiet. "The consortium found it 3 days later. They killed it in front of me as a lesson about cooperation." Roy felt that familiar anger building again. "And you just let them?" "What choice did I have? I was one person against a corporate army, but you are not alone, Roy. There are others who have lost specimens, lost colleagues, lost friends to consortium operations. We have been building a network, sharing information, helping each other when we can." Roy wanted to believe her, but trusting the wrong person would mean death for Starwing. "Even if what you say is true, what can a few scientists do against something that big?" Dr. Morrison smiled, and for the first time she looked less nervous. "More than you might think. We have contacts on dozens of worlds, people in government positions, even some consortium employees who are tired of what they have been ordered to do. The problem has always been evidence and safe passage for survivors." "Survivors?" "The specimens they have been hunting. The creatures they claim are extinct. There are more than you might expect, Roy. Hidden in private collections, protected by sympathetic researchers, kept alive in secret facilities, but they need safe passage to worlds where they can be free." Roy thought about Starwing learning human customs on his computer, asking questions about star maps and trade routes. The little dragon was not just hiding. Starwing was planning. "How do I know this is not a trap?" Roy asked. Dr. Morrison reached into her lab coat and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button and held it toward Roy. The device beeped once and stayed silent. "Listening device detector," she said. "If this conversation was being recorded, it would be screaming right now. I sweep my lab 3 times a day." Roy made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. "What would you need to help someone escape?" "Depends on the someone," Dr. Morrison said. "But generally false identification, a clean ship, and a destination that is not under consortium jurisdiction." "And you can provide those things?" "The network can. It will take time and careful planning, but yes." Dr. Morrison looked directly at Roy. "Is this someone small, Roy? Young?" Roy nodded before he could stop himself. Dr. Morrison closed her eyes for a moment. "They are getting more aggressive about targeting juveniles. Easier to control, more time to extract genetic material, fewer defensive capabilities." She opened her eyes and Roy saw tears. "How long have you been protecting them?" 3 days, Roy said, "then we need to move fast. The contractors will expand their search beyond the facility within the week. Do you have somewhere safe to keep them until we can arrange transport?" Roy thought about his small apartment and the hiding place he had built. It had seemed clever 3 days ago. Now it felt like a paper wall. "For now," he said, "but not for long. Dr. Morrison nodded. I will contact the network tonight. In the meantime, you need to be extra careful. No unusual behavior, no changes to your routine. Can you do that? Yes, Roy said, though he was not sure how he was supposed to act normal when his entire world had turned upside down. Good. Dr. Morrison headed toward the door, then paused. Roy, what you are doing protecting someone who cannot protect themselves, it matters. More than you know. After she left, Roy stood in the supply room for a long time, thinking about Starwing and sleeping places and corporate hunters. He had been a soldier once. He knew how to fight when fighting was needed. But this was different. This was not about winning battles. This was about keeping a child alive long enough to grow up free. Roy finished his shift and went home to find Starwing curled up in the hiding place, reading something on the computer screen. The little dragon looked up when Roy entered the room. Learn interesting things today, Starwing said, about humans and why you different from other species. What makes us different? Roy asked. Starwing climbed out of the hiding space and settled on Roy's shoulder, something that had become a habit over the past few days. Other species, they help family, help tribe, help own kind, Starwing said. But humans help strangers, help people they never meet, people who cannot help them back. Is very strange behavior. Roy smiled despite everything. Strange good or strange bad? Strange, wonderful, Starwing said, nuzzling against Roy's neck. Is why I feel safe with you. Roy hoped that feeling would last long enough to matter. Roy felt the vibration through the floor before he heard the sound. Heavy boots moving up the stairs of his apartment building, too many of them moving too fast. He looked at Starwing, who was reading at the kitchen table, and saw that the little dragon had heard it too. Those large amber eyes went wide with fear. Hide, Roy whispered. Now. Starwing scrambled toward the bedroom and the secret panel, but the footsteps were already on his floor. Roy heard voices in the hallway, orders being given in the clipped tones of military professionals. Someone was checking apartment numbers. They found us, Starwing said, voice shaking. Roy's mind raced through possibilities. The hiding place would not fool a detailed search with proper equipment. The window in his bedroom was too small for him, but maybe big enough for a young dragon. 3 floors down to the street, but Starwing could fly short distances now. Listen to me, Roy said, grabbing Starwing's shoulders gently. I am going to stall them as long as I can. You go out the bedroom window and find Dr. Morrison. Her apartment is in Building 7, Unit 42. Tell her what happened. No, Starwing said firmly. We go together or we stay together. The footsteps stopped outside Roy's door. Someone was attaching something to the lock, probably a bypass device. Roy had maybe 30 seconds. Starwing, you have to trust me, Roy said. I am good at talking to soldiers. I can make them think you were never here. But only if you are not here when they search. Starwing looked at him with those ancient eyes that seemed too old for such a young face. You lie to save me. They hurt you for lying. Maybe, Roy said. But they will hurt you worse if they catch you. And I am harder to break than I look. The lock clicked open. Roy pushed Starwing toward the bedroom and heard the soft sound of claws on the windowsill. By the time the soldiers entered his apartment, Roy was sitting on his couch reading a book, trying to look like someone who had been relaxing all evening. Roy Fletcher? The lead soldier was a woman with steel gray hair and scars on her hands. Professional, competent, dangerous, that is me, Roy said, not standing up. What can I do for you? Commander Vale, Consortium Security Division. We have reports of unauthorized biological specimens in this area. Mind if we take a look around? Roy shrugged. Go ahead. Not much to see. The soldiers spread through his small apartment like water, checking every corner, every closet, every possible hiding place. They had scanners that beeped and chirped as they worked, searching for heat signatures and genetic traces. Roy watched them destroy his carefully organized space and kept his face neutral. You work at the research facility, Commander Vale said. It was not a question. Night janitor, Roy said. 3 years now. Access to the xenobiology wing? I clean it, Roy said. Mop floors, empty trash, wipe down computers. Same as everywhere else. One of the soldiers called out from the bedroom. Commander, we have trace biological signatures here. Definitely non-human, definitely recent. Roy felt his heart sink, but he kept his expression bored. That would be Dr. Morrison's samples. She asked me to hold some of her research materials over the weekend. Something about temperature control issues in her lab. Commander Vale studied his face carefully. Dr. Morrison, you say? Yes, nice lady. Always polite. Roy hoped Starwing had made it to Dr. Morrison's apartment safely. Interesting, Commander Vale said, because Dr. Morrison was arrested 6 hours ago for theft of classified biological materials. Roy felt the world shift around him. 6 hours ago, Dr. Morrison had been preparing to contact her network of allies. Now she was in consortium custody, which meant they knew about the underground resistance, which meant Starwing was flying straight into a trap. Did not know that, Roy said, keeping his voice steady. Guess I should have asked more questions about what I was storing. Commander Vale sat down across from him, close enough that Roy could see the calculation in her eyes. Mr. Fletcher, let me explain your situation. We know that a valuable specimen escaped from one of our research vessels 3 days ago. We know it made its way to the facility where you work. We know someone has been helping it hide. Sounds like a problem, Roy said, but I do not know anything about escaped specimens. The specimen is a juvenile Draconis stellaris. Extremely rare, extremely valuable, worth more than you could earn in 100 lifetimes of cleaning floors. Commander Vale leaned forward. We also know that whoever has been helping it is not doing so for money. Roy said nothing. Sometimes the best response was no response at all. That makes this personal, Commander Vale continued, which means the person helping it will not give up easily. But here is what you may not understand, Mr. Fletcher. The consortium has unlimited resources and unlimited patience. We will find this specimen eventually. The only question is how many people get hurt in the process. Still do not know what you are talking about, Roy said. Commander Vale sighed and gestured to her soldiers. Search the building. Every apartment, every storage area, every possible hiding place. Use the deep scanners. As the soldiers filed out, Commander Vale stood up and looked around Roy's small apartment one more time. You know, Mr. Fletcher, I believe you when you say you do not know about Dr. Morrison's arrest, but I think you know exactly where our missing specimen is. Roy met her eyes steadily. Think whatever you want. I will, Commander Vale said. And while I am thinking, my people will be expanding their search. This building first, then the surrounding blocks, then the entire district. The specimen cannot hide forever. After they left, Roy sat in his destroyed apartment and tried to think of a plan. Starwing was out there somewhere, hopefully smart enough to avoid Dr. Morrison's building if it was being watched. But where could a young dragon hide on a human colony world? How long before the consortium's scanners found those unique biological signatures? Roy looked at the window Starwing had escaped through and made a decision. He could not protect Starwing by hiding anymore. The only way to keep the little dragon safe was to take the fight to the people who were hunting them. Roy gathered what few useful things the soldiers had not destroyed and left his apartment for the last time. He had been a janitor for 3 years, but before that he had been a soldier. It was time to remember how to fight. The first step was finding Starwing before the consortium did. The second step was getting both of them off-world before Commander Vale's unlimited resources caught up with them. Roy did not know how he was going to accomplish either goal, but he knew he would figure it out or die trying. Starwing had chosen to trust him. Dr. Morrison had been captured trying to help them. Other people were risking their lives to protect specimens like Starwing from corporate hunters. Roy would not let their sacrifices be meaningless. He walked through the dark streets of the colony, heading toward the industrial district where a clever dragon might find places to hide among the machinery and storage tanks. Behind him, consortium soldiers continued their methodical search, getting closer with every hour that passed. Roy had told Starwing that family was about choice. Now it was time to prove that some choices were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. Roy found Starwing huddled inside a broken cargo container at the edge of the industrial district. The little dragon was shivering despite the warm night air, wings wrapped around itself like a blanket. When Starwing saw Roy approaching, those amber eyes filled with relief and terror at the same time. Roy, Starwing whispered. Dr. Morrison not come. Other humans in building, humans with weapons and scanners. I hide and wait, but she never come. Roy knelt down and gently gathered Starwing into his arms. The little dragon felt smaller than before, as if fear had made it shrink. Dr. Morrison was captured, Roy said softly. The bad people found out about her network. Starwing made that sobbing sound that broke Roy's heart every time. Is my fault. She helped me and now she hurt because of me. No, Roy said firmly. This is not your fault. The people who hurt her, the people who hunt you, They are the ones responsible. Not you. Starwing looked up at him with ancient eyes and a young face. What we do now? Where we go? They have ships and soldiers and machines that find anything. Roy had been thinking about that question while searching for Starwing. The consortium had superior technology, unlimited resources, and legal authority on most human worlds. Fighting them directly would be suicide. But Roy had learned something important during his military service. Sometimes the only way to win was to change the rules of engagement. We stop running, Roy said. We stop hiding. We do something they will not expect. What that mean? Roy pulled out a small communication device he had taken from his apartment. Standard civilian equipment, but with modifications he had made using skills learned in the military. It means we tell everyone the truth about what the consortium has been doing. Starwing tilted its head, confused. How we tell everyone? Your people, the Draconis Stellaris, you said they were guardians of knowledge, that they could access ancient databases and communication networks. Yes, but I am too young, cannot reach the deep networks, cannot speak to the star paths. Roy smiled, remembering something Starwing had said days earlier. But you said your people mature quickly under stress, that they develop abilities when survival depends on it. Starwing's eyes widened with understanding. You think if danger is big enough, I grow fast enough to use the ancient ways? I think you are already stronger than you know, Roy said. I think being separated from your people, being hunted, being forced to survive alone has been changing you. Have you noticed anything different about yourself in the past few days? Starwing considered this. Dreams are more clear. Sometimes I know things I never learn, and when I touch computers I feel the data moving inside them. Roy felt a surge of hope. That sounds like the beginning of the abilities you described. But even if I can reach the networks, who will listen? Who will believe? Roy thought about that. The galaxy was full of species who had their own problems, their own conflicts. Why would they care about one corporation hunting one supposedly extinct species? But maybe that was the wrong question. Maybe the right question was who else had reasons to oppose the consortium. Starwing, when you accessed the facility's databases, did you learn anything about other species the consortium has been hunting? Starwing nodded slowly. Many species. Lists and lists of genetic samples, breeding programs, extinction schedules. They not just hunt my people. They hunt anyone who has something they want. Then we are not alone, Roy said. There are others who have lost family, lost friends, lost entire species to consortium operations. If they knew the truth, if they knew there were survivors, maybe they would fight back. Starwing was quiet for a long moment, thinking, would be very dangerous. Consortium has listening posts, monitor stations. If I use the ancient networks, they find us quick. Then we make sure we are somewhere they cannot reach us when we make the broadcast. Where that be? Roy looked up at the stars visible between the industrial structures. Somewhere up there was a consortium research station where Dr. Morrison was being held, where other captured specimens were being experimented on, where evidence of corporate crimes was stored in secured databases. We go to them, Roy said. We rescue Dr. Morrison and anyone else they are holding. We get the evidence they have been hiding, and we broadcast everything from their own station. Starwing stared at him in amazement. Roy, that is crazy plan. Is impossible plan. Maybe, Roy said. But impossible plans sometimes work because no one expects them. Over the next hour, Roy outlined his strategy. It was insane, desperate, and likely to get them both killed. But it was also the only plan he could think of that might actually work. They would steal a small transport ship from the colony's docking bay. Roy had maintenance codes from his facility work that should get them past basic security. Starwing would use its growing abilities to access the ship's navigation systems and guide them to the consortium research station. Once there, they would dock using falsified emergency codes. Roy would locate the detention area, while Starwing accessed the station's central computer. They would free the prisoners, download the evidence, and broadcast everything to the galaxy before the consortium could stop them. Many things can go wrong, Starwing pointed out. Yes, Roy agreed. But if we do nothing, they will catch us eventually anyway. At least this way, we fight back. Starwing looked at Roy for a long time, studying his face in the dim light from the industrial district. You were soldier before. You know how to fight, how to plan battles. But this not your war, Roy. These not your people they hunt. Why you risk everything? Roy thought about that question. Why was he doing this? Starwing was right. This was not his war, not his species, not his responsibility. He could probably find a way to get off-world alone, start over somewhere else, live a quiet life and never think about corporate hunters or extinct dragons again. Because 3 days ago, a scared child asked me if they could stay the night, Roy said finally, and I said yes. Everything else follows from that choice. Starwing made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Humans are very strange species. So I've been told, Roy said. They made their way toward the docking bay as the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. Behind them, consortium search teams continued their methodical sweep of the colony. Ahead of them lay a plan so desperate it might actually work. Roy had been a soldier, then a janitor, then a protector of lost children. Now he was about to become something else entirely. He was not sure what to call someone who declared war on an interstellar corporation, but he supposed he would figure it out along the way. Starwing rode on his shoulder as they walked. No longer the terrified creature he had found in a supply closet. The little dragon was growing, changing, becoming something that could fight back. Roy just hoped they both lived long enough to see what Starwing would become. 3 years had passed since the night Roy Fletcher decided to steal a transport ship and declare war on the Hegemony Consortium. He sat now in the garden of the sanctuary he and Starwing had built together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. The peaceful world of Haven's Rest had become home to more than 200 rescued creatures from 47 different species, all of them survivors of corporate hunting operations. The plan to raid the consortium research station should have been a disaster. Roy still marveled that any of them had survived it. But Starwing's abilities had grown beyond anything either of them had imagined during the desperate flight through space. The young dragon had not only accessed the station's computers but had somehow connected to ancient networks that spanned the entire galaxy, broadcasting the truth about consortium operations to every inhabited world simultaneously. The evidence they had stolen showed decades of illegal genetic harvesting, systematic species extermination, and corporate cover-ups that reached into the highest levels of multiple governments. The galaxy had erupted in outrage. Worlds had withdrawn from consortium trade agreements. Military forces had turned against corporate security divisions. Within 6 months, the mighty Hegemony Consortium had collapsed under the weight of its own crimes. Dr. Morrison had been among the 37 survivors they had rescued from the research station. She now served as the sanctuary's chief medical officer, helping traumatized creatures heal from their ordeals. She had never stopped thanking Roy for refusing to abandon her, though Roy insisted it was just what anyone would have done. Roy, a voice called from across the garden. Roy turned to see Starwing approaching, no longer the small creature that had once fit in his arms. The dragon was now nearly 20 feet long, with scales that shimmered like starlight and wings that could carry them both across continents. But the amber eyes were the same, still filled with intelligence and kindness. "How did the meeting go?" Roy asked. Starwing settled beside him, careful not to crush the flowers that grew around the garden benches. "The Galactic Council has officially recognized the Guardian Protocol. We now have legal authority to protect endangered species and investigate genetic crimes anywhere in the galaxy." Roy smiled. The Guardian Protocol had been Starwing's idea, based on ancient traditions of the Draconis Stellaris. It was a partnership between surviving Guardian species and sympathetic members of younger races, dedicated to protecting those who could not protect themselves. "That is good news," Roy said. "Does this mean you will have to travel more often?" "Some travel, yes. But my home is here with you." Starwing's head lowered until they were at eye level. "You are still my heart, Father Roy. That will never change." Roy reached out and patted the smooth scales of Starwing's snout, just as he had when the dragon was small enough to hide in a supply closet. "And you are still my family. All of this," he gestured at the sanctuary around them, "exists because you were brave enough to ask a stranger for help, and because that stranger was brave enough to say yes," Starwing replied. They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Roy thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a chance meeting in a research facility to building a new kind of family from species across the galaxy. The sanctuary was more than just a refuge now. It had become a symbol of hope for creatures who had lost everything to corporate greed and systematic hunting. Ships arrived weekly carrying survivors who had heard about the place where extinct species lived free and protected. Each arrival brought new stories of survival, New bonds of friendship across species lines, new proof that cooperation was stronger than exploitation. Roy, Starwing said quietly, do you ever regret the choices you made? Your quiet life as a janitor was peaceful. This life has much more danger and responsibility. Roy considered the question. His life had certainly become more complicated. He now served as the sanctuary's administrator, coordinating rescue operations and managing diplomatic relations with dozens of worlds. He had testified before galactic tribunals, negotiated with government officials, and helped plan missions to liberate creatures from illegal research facilities. But he also woke up every morning to the sound of children playing in the gardens, children from species that corporate databases had listed as extinct. He spent his days helping beings find safety and purpose after losing everything they had ever known. He fell asleep each night knowing that his choices had made the galaxy a safer place for those who could not fight for themselves. No regrets, Roy said firmly. This is better than peaceful. This is meaningful. Starwing made that humming sound that Roy had learned meant deep contentment. The young ones ask about you sometimes, about why you helped me when you had no reason to trust an alien child. What do you tell them? I tell them that some beings are born to protect others, regardless of species or appearance or potential reward. I tell them that humans have a saying about family being about choice, and I tell them that you chose to be family to anyone who needed it. Roy looked around the garden, where creatures from dozens of worlds lived together in harmony. Children who would have died in corporate laboratories now played games that mixed traditions from across the galaxy. Adults who had lost their entire species found new purpose in protecting others from the same fate. Speaking of family, Roy said, I understand we are expecting new arrivals tomorrow. Starwing's eyes brightened. 17 survivors from a private collector on Titan 7, mostly juveniles, but including 3 adults who remember the old ways of their people. They will need time to heal, but I think they will be happy here. Roy nodded. The sanctuary had grown beyond anything he had imagined when he first hid Starwing in his apartment. They now had multiple residential areas, medical facilities, schools that taught young beings about their heritage, and workshops where adults could learn new skills or practice traditional crafts. And the delegation from the Andorian Republic? They arrive next week to study our integration protocols. They want to establish similar sanctuaries in their sector. Starwing paused. Roy, did you know that there are now 43 worlds with Guardian Protocol sanctuaries? All of them based on what we built here. Roy felt a warm satisfaction at that news. The model they had created was spreading across the galaxy, providing hope and safety for creatures who had nowhere else to turn. It was more than he had dared to dream when he was just a janitor, trying to protect one scared dragon. A soft chime from Roy's communication device interrupted his thoughts. He checked the message and smiled. More good news, he said. The tribunal on Centauri Prime has convicted the last of the consortium board members. That is the end of the major trials. Justice at last, Starwing said with satisfaction. Though no trial can bring back the species they exterminated. No, Roy agreed. But justice can prevent it from happening again. And survival can ensure that the memory of lost species lives on in their descendants. As if summoned by their conversation, a group of young creatures approached from the residential area. Roy recognized most of them by now. 3 young Stellaris dragons, siblings to Starwing from eggs that had been recovered and hatched at the sanctuary. A pair of crystalline beings whose species had been thought extinct for decades. Several fluffy creatures that looked like living clouds but possessed remarkable intelligence. Uncle Roy, one of the young dragons called out. Starwing promised to tell us about the old days before the sanctuary. Will you tell the story too? Roy looked at Starwing, who had acquired the habit of smiling in the human fashion. I suppose we have time for one story before bedtime. The young creatures settled in a circle around them, eyes bright with curiosity. Roy realized this had become a tradition, these evening story sessions where the older residents shared memories of the early days. It was a way of passing down the history of how they had all come to be family. Well, Roy began. It started on a night when I was just a janitor cleaning floors in a research facility. I heard a sound coming from a supply closet, and when I opened the door, I found someone who needed help. And you said yes, one of the crystalline children said, having heard the story many times before. I said yes, Roy confirmed, because sometimes the most important moments in your life come disguised as simple questions. Sometimes changing the galaxy starts with someone asking if they can stay the night. As Roy continued the story, telling about hiding places and escape plans and impossible rescues, he noticed new arrivals at the edge of the garden. A family of refugees from the recent conflicts in the Outer Rim, still nervous and uncertain but drawn by the sound of laughter and safe voices. Roy caught Starwing's attention and nodded toward the newcomers. Without interrupting the story, Starwing rose and approached the family, speaking softly in several languages until they relaxed enough to join the circle. By the time Roy finished the tale, the garden was full of beings from across the galaxy, all of them part of the same unlikely family. Children who had been born free thanks to the sacrifices of others. Adults who had found new purpose in protecting the innocent. Elderly beings who had lived to see their species survive against impossible odds. "The end," Roy said, though of course it was not really the end at all. "Tell another one," several voices called out. Roy looked around at the expectant faces, thinking about all the stories that had brought them together. Stories of escape and rescue, of loss and hope, of beings from different worlds choosing to become family. "Tomorrow," he promised. "There will always be more stories tomorrow." As the group dispersed toward their homes, Roy remained in the garden with Starwing, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. "Do you think we have made a difference?" Starwing asked. Roy thought about scared creatures finding safety, extinct species being brought back from the edge of oblivion, and young beings growing up free instead of in laboratory cages. "I think," Roy said, "that every time someone chooses to help instead of look away, they change the universe a little bit. Add up enough small changes, and eventually you change everything." Starwing hummed contentedly and wrapped one great wing around Roy like a blanket. "Thank you, Heartfather, for saying yes when I asked if I could stay." Roy leaned against his dragon's warm side and watched the stars wheel overhead, each one a sun that might warm worlds where other unlikely families were forming, where other beings were choosing to protect instead of exploit, where other children were asking strangers for help and finding fathers instead. "Thank you for asking," Roy said softly. "Thank you for trusting me enough to ask." In the distance, he could hear the sounds of the sanctuary settling down for the night. Children being tucked into beds, adults sharing quiet conversations, families of choice gathering strength for whatever tomorrow might bring. It was better than peaceful. It was home.